Well, good morning. Hopefully you can all hear me, and welcome on board to the third Engage Insight RegTech webinar, live webinar. We're running a whole suite of these over the coming months, covering all the wonderful world of compliance and business and professional development. Today, we're going to be taking a broad overview of the senior managers and certification regime. A couple of housekeeping points before we go any further is if you take a look at your control panel for join.me, you should be able to see an audio mode. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can't hear me, please check your audio settings to make sure that they're all on. If you still have problems, please just call in using the 020 number. So if you have problems, there's a few more people joining now. If you have problems with audio, because this might be hitting a firewall or something in your system, then please do phone in, and that should then direct you straight in to this webinar, and that should work. But hopefully you're all on and you can all hear me, and your computer audio is working accordingly. So today it's just myself, myself and I. I should change the photograph. I'm not smiling there, am I? But today it's me. We do have some guest hosts to come in and help us present on all things compliance and business and professional development. My background is I've been in the industry now for 26 years or so, and I've worked internationally as well as in the UK. I was in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Australia. So I've kind of been around the block a bit and seen a lot of what's going on. And coming back to the UK, we developed Engage really to take a look at the RegTech and compliance and business development areas to help support your professional journey going forward and make sense, if you like, of this, of what is now reigning regulations environment that we're in. Today, we're really going to talk about 4 or 5 key areas regarding the senior managers and certification regime. Take a look at the key components, take a look at the background, to start, take a look at the key components, how it's made up, how it's replacing the approved persons regime, how it will really affect you in your everyday work. So look at some challenges, and also, most importantly, look at some solutions. And we always provide you with top tips about how to improve going forward, and what you may want to take on board with the SMCR. Now, as we all know, the regime applied to everybody, every regulated firm come 2018. And then I'll just finish off by talking about our RegTech platform and how that will help you make sense of this particular directive, but also other directives that are coming through, such as MiFID II, GDPR, etc., etc. So let's move on to a time frame. If I can take you through some key issues regarding the SMCR and put it more into context for you, if you like. Really what we're looking at is it's a move to understanding the culture and conduct within the firm. Our biggest issue or question mark is there's been really no defined definition of what conduct is and what that may mean, and we're still, really rummaging around what that could actually mean for firms. So a lot of firms have different ideas of what culture and conduct is, and that's a risk. So obviously the regulator needs to do, we believe, a bit more around that. But really what we're looking at is through the FCA annual risk outlooks and their business plans that they publish each year. We're seeing a strong move towards accountability within organisations where the onus is on individuals with areas of significant responsibility. And really it's about them stepping up, if you like, being accountable and owning those responsibilities. Certain signposts have helped over the recent years. We've had regulatory speeches and litigation cases. So, for example, you may remember the Barclays litigation case that came to the fore last year, which is all about whistleblowing and ignoring a certain whistleblower within the business. Financial Stability Board guidance on supervisory interactions has been very helpful. The Basel Committee on Banking Corporate Governance, G30 call for sustained reform in banking conduct. And then we have the whole issues around principles of corporate governance and Bank of England supervisory statements on board responsibilities. So really we're taking a whole leap now into a whole new world of culture and conduct assessment within the industry. What we're looking at here is that one of the best ways to look at what conduct is if you revisit a speech by Tracy McDermott, who looked at the conduct risk speech for the BBA in 2015. She looked at 5 key questions that you need to ask around your business, which is identifying the conduct risks inherent within the business. You know, who is responsible for managing the conduct of the business and the culture of the business? What support mechanisms do people have to improve their conduct? And how do the board and executive committees gain oversight? Now, you may be thinking about those 4 key questions. Well, it doesn't apply to us. We're not a large enough organisation. Well, unfortunately, it does. Although the SMCR was brought in to take a look at the banks and was brought in under the PRA as well, you know, the FCA are now keen to extend the regime as per their paper in July to come across the whole of the regulated environment. So from that perspective, it will touch your business. Finally, do firms have perverse incentives, activities that may undermine strategies? So the whole area of inducements and that comes into play there. Really, we have a total move into this area of moving away from the blame game, moving away from what we call a passive defensive or aggressive culture to what we call a constructive culture, which, if you look at this riddle, if you like, there were 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done. Everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. So at the end of the day, what we're looking at here is really the new regime is about reducing harm to consumers and strengthening market integrity by making individuals more accountable for their conduct and competence. There's no hiding, if you like. So what we've got is 2 ways the FCA hopes that can be achieved: encouraging a culture of staff at all levels taking the personal responsibility, and also making sure firms and staff clearly understand and can demonstrate where that responsibility lies itself. Why the change? Well, kind of as mentioned and alluded to, we've got the financial crisis of 2008, we've got the mis-selling and libel scandals, the FCA focus, as we've mentioned, on conduct, culture and governance, increasing strength around accountability of individuals within firms and trying to improve conduct standards on an ongoing basis, which is all reflected in the latest business plan from the FCA. Timeline is really important to put more context around it, because we had, as I've mentioned, the SMCR was implemented for banks on the 7th of March 2016. With that, we had a certification process which were issued certificates across, which sat underneath the SMR. So certification regime is actually different to the SMR, but it's like an umbrella, really, the SMR, that underneath that comes the conduct and the certification. And then you've got the extension of the regime, which was published in the FCA paper, CP 1715, and the implementation of that extension is through next year. So we really have to be ready with our businesses to understand how this is going to touch us as we go forward. Talking about the culture change, if you're unsure about what that means, really we've looked at what that means from 4 key areas. Tone at the top of the business. Doesn't matter how big the business is, it depends on how you're running the business, how you're outsourcing, for example, making sure due diligence is done throughout the decision making across the business, and obviously how you're touching clients and what that means. Setting tangible goals for the business, making sure it's realistic, using realistic, smart goal setting is important, and looking at your objectives. So really getting strategic, if you like, around where the business is going. Firms' documented strategy is key, and again, there's a lot of crossover between this and MiFID II. So a key area regarding MiFID II is how well you're documenting client communications across the business. That is certainly the case for the SMCR. And finally, is mindset of the individuals in the business. Are you all on the same page? Are you all on the same understanding going forward? And that is important. So that wheel that we've got here the diagram that you've got on this particular slide, which was taken from the FCA Risk Outlook in 2014 now, which is very much a behavioural economic driven paper. But this is all about the inherent risks, which really the biases, the rules of thumb, the mental shortcuts that we may make when we're running a business, the growing importance of financial capability, certainly for consumers and making sure that we're supporting that going through. Then you've got the structures and business conduct, which is really where the SMCR sits, which is the conflict of interest, the cultural incentives and the market structures that are in place. So let's take a look at some of the components here. As mentioned, we only have half an hour, so it really is taking a look at some key areas surrounding components of the regime that's coming through. The senior managers is really the responsibilities of senior managers, have to be clearly set out. And should something in the area of responsibility go wrong, then obviously they're personally held to account. So there's a lot of issues surrounding being at the cutting edge, if you like, of decision making and risk management within the business. The senior managers themselves will be approved by the FCA and appear on the FCA register itself. There was a grandfathering approach which kind of ended in last year for people under the APA regime. And it's really about a duty to take reasonable steps with the business, whether you're delegating, team building, making sure that everybody, as I mentioned, is on the same page and understanding going forward. The key areas regarding roles and responsibilities is obviously crucial to understand where we're looking at senior managers in the business. And so roles really should be allocated to one individual. But the FCA, thankfully, is being pragmatic and realizing that role sharing does happen and needs to happen sometimes, or dividing a functional responsibility may be appropriate. So they will allow that in, but it obviously has to be documented quite clearly. 3 responsibility types. You've got the senior management functions, which effectively replace the old significant influence functions. So, for example, acting as chairman or chief financial officer, a function must be approved by the regulators and subject to the SMR, the senior management regime. Prescribed responsibilities really is all about what are important functions other than the senior management functions, each of which must be allocated to one of the existing senior management functions. And then you've got key functions underneath that, which is really understanding the importance of functions, and they again must be allocated to significant responsibility under the SMF, the senior management regime. So here we've just got a table giving types of roles and what those roles are within the business. And again, if you're a smaller business, it's still, you may actually be exempt in a way from this, but the certainly certification and the roles and responsibilities and the ideas around accountability are definitely going to touch your business as you go forward. The certification regime in itself is essentially the level below the senior management regime, although they do overlap. And really this is understanding under the certification regimes, firms really need to certify individuals for their fitness, their skill, their propriety at least once a year. And that needs to be overseen by the senior managers. They're not covered by the senior management regime, but their jobs significantly impact customers or firms and firms' activities. So really the regulator needs to ensure that the firm has an effective overall certification process going through. So even if you're not handling client money, material risk takers, for example, people involved in the business who have an influence on risk, which is normally, if you have the CF30 role or people who are obviously client-facing and people dealing with compliance within the business, they're all underneath this, and they need to be really taken into account on their accountability, and their roles and responsibilities need to be clearly laid out. Conduct, we then have the new conduct rules, and they're really based on the previous rules for individuals under the APA scheme, the approved person regime scheme. But here you'll see there are 5 rules covering the first tier individual conduct rules, which is all about integrity, due care and diligence, communications with the regulators, customer interest and treating customers fairly, standards of market conduct. I'm sure all that will be familiar with you, which is good news. At the end of the day, this is the stuff that you need to know will be your bread and butter going forward when it applies to the SMCR going through next year. And then we have a second tier of senior management conduct rules, which is all about the ensuring the firm's business is controlled effectively, firm's business complies with regulatory system requirements, delegation to appropriate persons, oversee that and discharge it effectively, disclose information that the regulator would certainly reasonably expect you to disclose. So again, it's being on the ball, understanding at all times what the regulator expects from you if you are a senior manager or certified member of staff, and understanding also what they're expecting from you from a conduct point of view. We then really have an overview of what the regime means. Senior managers approved by the FCA, certifies regime staff. The onus is on you, the firm. Then you've got the conduct rules, which is enforceable conduct rules, which is basically everybody who's involved within the business, and then auxiliary staff, which is not covered by the rules themselves. I mean, will any firms be exempt is a common question that we get, and it's certainly something someone's just sent through. Well, sole trading financial advisors, for example, are classified as limited scope firms under the rules, and this means that while they need to have a compliance oversight function in place, they will not have to allocate the financial conduct authority's necessary responsibilities to individual senior managers, but they still will need to have a certification, the conduct rules in play, and know what they mean going forward. Challenges. So now we kind of have an idea, if you like, a framework, a high-level view of the SMCR and how it may apply and touch us. There are obviously going to be challenges going forward in how we apply it to the business as we go forward. So first thing we've got here is a gap analysis, where really it's identifying and remediation of any gaps. Who are the people who own the responsibilities? What level of seniority are they? And what competencies do they have? What's the impact on any managers in the business? Clear delineation of accountability, reduction of responsibilities with career impact, and demonstrate competency and new hires to fill those gaps. And then you've got the duty of responsibility, delegation of responsibilities documented and overseen, and we'll talk about that in a little while when I give you some solutions. Need to keep additional records of actions and decisions as you go forward. We've then got further, obviously the thing about right people, right place, right skills is important, looking at the key areas surrounding the HR process. So there needs to be really a more rigorous appraisal process when you're taking on people, new and additional legal risks, maybe training program enhancements to deliver on new competency requirements is obviously key, and recruitment, and regulatory references is going to be important there. You've got the ongoing training and certification, so need to demonstrate ongoing competency through training on the technical and regulatory topics, a bit like the CPD process that you go through at the moment, where you've got the structured and non-structured CPD. And need for firms to assess ongoing competencies we talked about at least annually with a certification regime itself. Now, really what we're suggesting is that the SMCR is a cultural change. It's not a checklist and a task list, task, if you like. So, but what we've got here is a task list, if you like, for implementation. If you're putting together a project, so we're working with a fair amount of firms at the moment on this type of thing, to take a look at the culture, look at the business, look at the roles and responsibilities, and start to rejig that accordingly. So what we're looking at is clear statement of intent, embed the SMCR into culture of the business. How are you going to do that? Analysis of the change programs. It's really a project management issue that you've got at play. How are you going to manage that going forward? Normally with project management, it's always good to start, shall I say, with the end objective in mind and work it back. Define who are the senior managers and material risk takers we've talked about. Test how current responsibilities are delivered. Identify change job descriptions, role profiles. I'll talk about that in a minute. Prepare and submit approval for statements of responsibility, and create mechanisms to monitor and assess compliance on an ongoing basis. Some solutions for you. We have a CPD certificate program with the CISI CPD certification service, which is called Professional Skills Development Program, and we currently have that with a number of wealth management firms, IFAs, financial planners in the country and abroad, currently being used by them. And we train in really the new soft skills, behavioural skills, compliance skills that they need to build the business going forward. And one of the things that we use is a diagnostic which really assesses individual behaviours and their impact of behaviours across their client interaction and their team and business interactions. And this really is as an overview of how that diagnostic looks, looking at constructive style of behaviours, passive styles, which is very much rule following, resisting ideas, waiting for others to act and laying low when things get tough. And then on the red zone over on the left, you've got the aggressive defensive styles, which are very task orientated. On the right, it's more people orientated. And that is all about, hitting targets, being competitive, being in power. So if you're looking at this from a SMCR point of view, they want to really see you moving in. The FCA want to see you moving more into that blue zone, the constructive styles at the top, which is all about developing others, resolving conflicts constructively, cooperation, teamwork, working towards self-set standards and goals as you go forward, and documenting that scenario. What the FCA will need the larger firms to do, but I recommend that smaller firms do this as well, is just map out who does what, where is everybody, what do you do, and how does it impact on your business on a day-to-day basis, internally and externally. So SMCR sits in the middle. You've got the management and corporate, the governance arrangements around that, how that sits. Even if you're outsourcing it, it's worthwhile looking at how that works. Senior management responsibilities, reporting lines, allocation of responsibility, how the management and governance arrangements fit. What we've done with a number of firms is we've taken a look at mapping out roles and responsibilities, and this is just an example of one particular firm that we're currently working with, and we're doing that with, and that's really looking at the role, and there's far more roles, but this is just a snapshot of theirs, and then mapping out the responsibilities, mapping out qualities are expected, and obviously time considerations are important from that perspective to really look at when things need to get done to hold them accountable to those particular roles and responsibilities and tasks. From a HRD, human resource development side, personal development plans are very important, and they help individuals in business take responsibility for what they do. It helps them get on the same page, if you like, with everybody else. So this is just an example of the way we develop them going forward. Executive summary, goals and objectives, market environment that they're operating in, business strategies that they've agreed to, and ongoing measurement and management going forward. That really would sit very nicely with the conduct and certification areas of the SMCR. Key question to ask going forward, just finishing up for you here. What we've got on the question side is, some key areas that I've pulled together for you, which is looking at, is the analysis and change program robust that you're putting into play? Because at the end of the day, unfortunately, the regulations don't stand still, and we need to have change programs in place to really cater for what's coming over the hill, if you like, which is what the SMCR and GDPR too, and everything else that's coming through is certainly doing. Are the populations of senior managers and material risk takers complete and accurate? Have governance and reporting mechanisms been enhanced to properly reflect the SMCR? Have recruitment and onboarding processes been enhanced? Are the controls that have been established to monitor compliance with the SMCR effective? Are all senior management and material risk takers clear about their responsibility? That just doesn't apply to those particular areas. Is everybody really clear about their responsibilities in the business and how that may change and affect others? Are senior management clear about how they discharge their responsibilities, and are all senior management confident in their judgment and decisions that they're making? How are they sense checking? Do you have a 4 eyes approach, for example? All those good compliance practice and risk management practice is coming in here. Are senior management confident that their staff are competent as they go forward? Some top tips for you. Really, as mentioned, one of the things that we, advocate is moving away from a tick box and checklist mentality, certainly with compliance development, and that's what our RegTech platform model office does. It really moves you away from that and gets you thinking more strategically at how you're building your professional practice on an ongoing basis based on your strategic plans, based on what the FCA need from you, and also, most importantly, I guess, what your clients want from you. So it's really treating it as a cultural shift, not a compliance tick box exercise. Focus on the regime's desired outcomes, map roles and responsibilities that I've talked about, shown you with detailed explanations, and focus on impact of behaviour and behavioural development, as I've shown with that diagnostic that we use, which can be used on a team, individual, leader, manager, or cultural basis. So moving on to the RegTech platform that we operate, just to give you an idea of how all this sits. The SMCR is all about the people, and that sits on the right, certainly in the people key that we call. So we have 5 keys across the RegTech platform, which takes a look at a balanced scorecard, if you like, across how you're performing as a business across all what the FCA need and want, and all their regulations that come through, and much more. MiFID II's in there, SMCR has talked about, GDPR, etc. All that's important. But when we're talking about your people, you can see that the business functions that are in there, that Model Office will ask you about, how well have you got this in place, and where are you coming short, and what your blind spots are. And what Model Office will then do is actually give you strategy to improve your scores on an ongoing basis across all these business functions in this particular key. So you can see here from the SMCR point of view, organizational structure, position descriptions, recruitment, induction program, performance management, staff learning development, etc. All these areas are really touching on the SMCR. And really what Model Office and our RegTech platform will allow you to do digitally is to really get a firm idea of where you're sitting against these FCA requirements and what you need to do next, most importantly, and how you can move forward as a business and make sure everything's in play. So just to finish off for you, there's a great quote which I found from another consultancy actually, on a talk on the SMCR, which was given recently, which is Andrew Bailey, who is, as you all know, the FCA Chief Executive. And he said at a recent conference, just before the new accountability regime was introduced, I was at an event debating the concept of responsibility, with many arguing that it's difficult to define, hence what I talked about regarding conduct. A young lady stood up and said that she didn't know what all the fuss was about. She was teaching her children to take responsibility for their actions, so why should people who work in financial services should be any different? Well, there you go. That's food for thought on a Friday morning. So thanks so much for your time. Very much appreciated. You can view more about what we do at model-office.co.uk. Our next live webinar will be in a couple of weeks, which I'll let you all know about, which will be on good old MiFID II and the key takeaways from that and how we need to be prepared for that going into 2018. So I hope it's not raining where you are. It is where we are. Have a great Friday and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks very much for your time.